Welcome everybody to downtown Titusville and Spaceview Park, where I am Mark Marquette in the Apollo Monument Gallery of this beautiful facility that celebrates the birth of the space age at the American Space Museum. We're glad that you're with us. Marty Winkle is my cameraman behind the scenes there. He is an Apollo worker with Grumman that built the lunar module that lifted off the surface of the moon 51 years ago this afternoon. How exciting is that? Well, a baby boomer like me that was 15 years old, I'm reliving a passion that I've had all my life, and it's so unbelievable that I'm able to be your host and speak to you from this really rare place on Earth. And you're at Spaceview Park. We want to help you stay curious with a program that was born out of the COVID pandemic and has certainly become a wonderful silver lining to this horrible thing that's going on. And I wanted to give a shout out to a few people, but Marty, pan in a little bit there. We have some visitors here, and they're looking at President Kennedy's statue over there that Marty's panning in there for you as he takes me off camera. And Marty's showing you the monuments that are standing up there. We call them pylons, and they have names of workers. There's some visitors. And we talked to them a little bit earlier, these ladies, and told them this was a great day in space history, and we're glad that they're here. But we're also glad you're here with us. We want to give a shout out to Joe Lynn, one of our volunteers in DeLand. Thank you for watching, Joe Lynn. David Stang up in Macomb, Michigan. We posted a picture of David on our Facebook page. Hi, David. We know you're watching. He just had a T-shirt that said July 20th, 1969. That's keeping them guessing, David. We have Dean Salzwedel in New Zealand. Good morning to you, sir. And Robert Law in Scotland, of course. Good evening to you, Robert. And we thank you, Robert, for giving us a heads up on the launch update yesterday, that I went over to Spaceview Park with my cell phone and shot that beautiful launch. It's a gorgeous day like today here in the midsummer, 90 degrees, beautiful blue skies and puffy clouds. And that allowed Marty and we communicated this morning and said, let's go out to Spaceview Park and show our friends that want to stay curious what this beautiful place looks like. And also Bob Castro, if you're watching from Atlanta, we can't wait to get Bob on the show. He is another historian that is saving archival film of the space age. And Dean Babcock, we say hello to you up there in Decatur, Illinois. We know you're enjoying your summer up there as we help you all stay curious. Enough of my props here. All I need is the good old American flag here beside me waving to let you know that this is a date in history. It's just not American history. This is world history. It's not even a world history. This is the history of humanity, where the first humans to leave Earth blasted off a celestial body, our moon, on a very risky mission that even Neil Armstrong, the great commander of this mission, gave a 50-50 chance of working out. Of course, beside him was Buzz Aldrin. Buzz is still alive at age 90. I'm sure he's had a couple good days of fun celebrating him being on the moon. And of course, Buzz Aldrin is the iconic image of the moon that Neil Armstrong took of the first man in the moon. We call that the visor shot in the business because Neil Armstrong and the lunar module is in the visor of Buzz Aldrin when he took that picture 51 years ago today. And we can't forget about Mike Collins, all right? Mike Collins was the third astronaut orbiting the moon while his two mates were down on the surface for their 40s. And really a good, a great guy. I wish I could meet him and haven't yet, but everyone just loves him. And he was, after his NASA career, he was the director of the Smithsonian Space Institute for a long time, Smithsonian Museum. So we got to remember the late Neil Armstrong, who's been gone at least 5 years from us, maybe longer. And of course, Buzz Aldrin, age 90, and Michael Collins, who's 89 or 90. Collins is also another space artist, just like Nicole Stott, who we interviewed last Thursday. And you can see any of our Stay Curious shows on our archives. Great ones that we enjoyed so far. In our 18 weeks of doing this, we put some of them on YouTube, like Fred Hayes and Nicole Smith will be, Nicole Stott will be up there, and Fred Hayes is up there, and a bunch of other ones. So check out our YouTube page. But here we are, and this was 15 years ago, this become a reality where the founding fathers of Titusville wanted to pay an homage to their astronauts that launched into space just 10 miles away, Cape Kennedy Launch Center behind my back here. And what you see are these pylons, and Marty might zoom in a little bit there, and you see names on these pylons, where during the fundraising for this, space workers gave us $100 to the U.S. Space Walk of Fame Foundation. That is our parent nonprofit of the American Space Museum. And you can see these names to Rockwell, so on, North American, and the hands at the bottom base are handprints of Apollo astronauts with a picture of them up there. And we put Neil's and Buzz's up there yesterday. We're going to get to Michael Collins today because I hate leaving him out. But he thoroughly enjoyed being on the other side of the moon, away from everyone in civilization. Wrote a great book about it, Carrying the Fire. Recommend that wonderful book. The spacewalk. Yes. All right. Okay. I am going to do something risky here. Okay. I've got away from that battery, Marty.
Yeah, maybe it's good. Looks like it's good now.
Okay. Hey, live TV here at 4:15 in the afternoon in downtown Titusville. Robert Law, are we okay? Because we just had a little power failure. We had a new battery system we're trying out here. So everybody see me, or hear me, more importantly. I'm sure you can see me. Marty, what are we doing? Good? Okay. We getting okay from some of our friends there? All right. Okay. Well, we was getting wound up there, and this is always a technical nightmare when just a couple of us old baby boomers are pulling this off for you. So we're glad that you're here with us. We're talking about the crew, talked about Michael Collins being an artist and has some things that he likes, watercolors and that sort of thing, just like Nicole Stott, who we interviewed last Thursday. So we're going to look around here a minute that what happened this afternoon 51 years ago is the Apollo lunar module was on the surface in its two parts. And we're going to talk about that more in depth, particularly Thursday when we have a Grumman man with us, Bill Waldron, okay. And Bill Waldron's going to be with us Thursday. He was over the manufacturing of the lunar modules at KSC. So he was an upper tier management guy, but a great guy. And then we're going to have tomorrow Lee Solid. And Lee Solid was known as the rocket guy for Rocketdyne. He was responsible for all 31 engines on the Saturn V rocket that launched July 16th, just about 10 miles behind my head here at Space View Park in downtown Titusville. So we got some great shows for you. Friday, we're going to give you some details about the moon and that the astronauts have talked about. We had 6 landings. This, of course, was the first one. And the most historic one, never to be repeated, of course. And it's all about the execution of the logistics as well as the hardware, all right? And very little software as I wipe my brow on this trip. The computer in the lunar module had 64K kilobytes of memory, and it had to be, that was its RAM, and it had to be constantly be upgraded with new codes and so forth. And that was on a computer called the DSKY, Desky computer that looks like an adding machine. And we're going to talk in depth about that Friday. when we have so got the guys are on the moon. They were 2 hours out walking around. Neil about 2 hours and 10 minutes. Buzz a little bit longer, and Buzz was a little bit shorter. Came in earlier. Buzz was the last one down and the first one up. They had 57 pounds of rock and soil. It's interesting. Neil Armstrong said when he looked down at that box of rocks before he closed it, it looked kind of empty. So he started scooping regolith. That's the word for lunar soil in there, to fill it up. And that lunar soil became very valuable that he did that, because we found an element called O3, oxygen 3 in it, that we can do all kinds of things to sustain our lives on the moon. So they get up in the command module, and they, we'll tell you about that Friday, but some of that detail about it. But one thing that had to work to lift off the moon, as Mike Collins was coming around the bend, everything on the first stage and second stage had to separate of that lunar module. The descent stage is what they called the landing platform, but it had an engine of its own. And it had all kinds of wires and pipes and so forth that came to one certain area. And our friend behind the camera, Marty Winkle, had a lot. He said he was involved with what they call the guillotine, and it looked like a square, a rectangle, Marty said, about that big. And this guillotine had two super sharp, of course, blades that would cut like that. One blade could cut it, all that stuff that they had to separate, but two blades were there to make sure. And I remember Marty telling me the first time we become super friends, and he said it was his privilege to comb the electrical connectors of that area called the guillotine, because it had to work right. And at that same moment, when Buzz Aldrin actually pushed the button to lift off, there were other pyrotechnics around the perimeter of the lunar module that had to blast at the same time, and sever bolts. We call those squib bolts. And at the same instant, within milliseconds of each other, if they were delayed by 1/2 second, they would have never got off the moon. Something would have drug it back down, or some part of it would have, it'd have been horrible. So, in talking to these Grummanites, the Grumman men and women that built this lunar module, that's one thing that they're always very prideful of, is that always worked exactly the way it was. And you know what? When they landed on the moon at about 3:30 Central Time on July 20th, it was a Sunday, the people that built the lunar module, the Grummanites they call them, or Grummies, they did not celebrate. Their boss, George Skurla, who we talked to his son yesterday, said, we're not going to have a celebration, okay, until we lift off the moon and the astronauts are safely docked to Columbia, the command module where Mike Collins was. So quite a dramatic story, and some behind the scenes things. I've asked Marty, well, didn't you wave flags and everything when they landed? He says, no, our job wasn't done until we got off the moon and they got successfully docked to the space station, or the space station, to Columbia, the Apollo command module. 51 years ago today. So I can have a slip of the tongue and say space station, because I was a baby boomer that lived it and loved it, and thought by the time I was 25, 30 years old, we'd be having Antarctic-style bases on the moon. That was the plan. But we haven't been back since 1972 in December, and we will go back one day, all right, and hopefully within the next 5 years in the American Artemis program, and it will be a woman and a man go down to the moon. And unlike this moon landing, when we didn't have any video, everything was radio. You can ask Marty. I have asked Marty. They were biting their nails when the countdown came to lift off the moon, because it had to work. And if it didn't, oh my God, that'd be the end of the whole space program for sure. And so they're counting down and couldn't celebrate until that got off the moon. And then finally when it did, the triumphant, of this one lunar module, the only manned vehicle built to operate in the vacuum of space, and only the vacuum of space. And there's quite a tribute. No other vehicle has been built like this. It took a lot of ingenuity. One of the problems was shaving off every ounce, because those lives of depended on, every astronaut, all 12 of them, to get off the moon, there was maybe a play of a few pounds there that the propulsion system had enough to get up to where the orbiting mothership was. So quite a time 51 years ago, as I keep repeating myself. And we're out here on Spaceview Park. You know, in a half a century, no, we haven't got back to the moon. The Apollo program ended, and then it was another 7-8 years till we got to the shuttle program. We had 3 trips to our first space station, Skylab, and then 45 years ago, we were witnessing the splashdown of the Apollo-Soyuz test project, where Russia and America couldn't get along on the ground, and in fact, we're in a moon race to see who would win the moon, get to the moon first. But we could always cooperate in space since 1975, when 3 Americans and 2 astronauts, when 3 American astronauts and 2 Russian cosmonauts met in space during the Apollo-Soyuz test project. And today, there are 3 Americans and 2 Russians on the International Space Station, and carrying out a lot of important science and keeping that 20-year legacy of the thing being occupied alive. So, trying to think here what to bring forward here in my brain. I'm going to get a drink here. Marty, we did emphasize how our beautiful space workers are on these monuments. We have room on the Apollo monument. If you are a space worker that's not here, or know someone in your family who worked on the Mercury, Gemini, or Apollo program, we've got room on the Gemini and the Apollo areas for more names at $100 each. Go to info@americanspacemuseum.org and we'll fix you up. Behind me, in front of me is behind me is all of the Apollo. In front of me is all the shuttle. And you see that beautiful A there, Sandmeyer Stainless Steel in the Pittsburgh area donated this stainless steel to us 10, 15 years ago, and we thank them for it. If you're in the Pittsburgh area, let them know that we're out here in Spaceview Park showing off their work. And what the A is on top of are these gigantic bronze panels, that were designed by a sculpturist named Sandy Storm. And Sandy is back in the Space Coast area. She did this work 15 years ago, including the beautiful President Kennedy life-size bust of him, where he's delivering the famous speech at Rice University, challenged us to go to the moon. And we know down the line that Carolyn Kennedy saw a photograph of this taken by one of her friends, and she was taken aback that it looked so much like her father, our president, that challenged us to go to the moon. We did it 51 years ago and met that promise. And not only did we do it in July 20th, 1969, but we doubled down in November of 69 and landed Apollo 12, and in a sense said, take that, Russia, okay? Because they were in a moon race with us. They wanted to show that communism and the Soviet Union's way of life was much better than our democracy. And that was part of the impetus where all of the resources put into our moon program. This was also during a time that you can't forget history, when the Vietnam War was going on, okay? And we had a lot of civil rights problems in 1968 and 69 that caused a lot of unrest and caused a lot of change back then 50 years ago that we're grateful for. And today we're looking for more change, you know, for everybody's rights. And but 50 years ago, the world was kind of in a bad spot in America, with civil rights going on, the controversy of the Vietnam War winding down, and then finally, in the middle of the summer of '69, man lands on the moon for the first time in history, our greatest journey. So I'm glad that you're with us today to take you along on this journey, and hope that one day you can come to Spaceview Park and visit our museum that's just less than a mile away. Marty and I walk over here all the time, but we're so glad that you visit us today to help you stay curious. I'm Marquette. Tomorrow we will have Lee Solid with us a very legendary figure of the Saturn V rocket engines. And until we talk to Lee tomorrow, I can't wait to bridge the space between us.